Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
In this one, we're on location of the second rendition of Perpetual Church, so this is very unusual.
Okay, and so today he will be educating us on Our Lady of Perpetual Church in Holyoke. Its first location was near the Connecticut River, so tell us about the first church.
All right, that first church was the most unique-looking church in the Pioneer Valley. It was structured almost like an enormous Victorian home, and it was visible even from South Hadley. It was so large, it had 4 stories to it, physical stories. So it was a church with floors to it, and the floors were set so that the church part where the people come in to celebrate the Mass was on the first floor, and then as you went up it, you had different functions. So the school for the children was on the second floor. The convent for the nuns was on the third floor with their little chapel. And then on the fourth floor, you had the auditorium for social functions and for the school children. So it was a very convenient little Perpetual church. It was very unique. So I wish you could see an old picture of it. And it was there because ground zero of Holyoke's immigration was always centered around Pulaski Park, formerly known as Prospect Park. And there you had the Irish come in first, and then the French Canadians would come in, and then the Polish would come in. In 1890, there was enough French Canadians in that area to build their own church. And it was the second French Canadian Catholic church in Holyoke. The first was the Precious Blood Church in South Holyoke from 1870. In 1890, there was enough people there in the Pulaski Park area to build another church. And they built it in all in one function, almost. You notice I didn't say the rectory. The rectory is not there anymore, and neither is the church. But the rectory was across the street from the church. And they also built a tenement house that they kept for low-cost rentals to French Canadians that needed an extra a place to live but couldn't pay the full boat. Now, this was a really cool church. It built its own cemetery called the Notre Dame Cemetery. It was in South Hadley. They built that very soon after in 1891. And they got this going real quick, and it was a very, very functional church.
Now, what happened to the original church?
All right, so what happened to it? It's not there anymore. Well, by 1922, the French Canadians were getting to be wealthier. And what happens in Holyoke when you're wealthier? You move higher up, either higher uphill or higher up in district towards the south, and you get away from the east and the north, which were always the poor districts. And so that original church in 1922 moved to the corner of Chestnut Street and Cabot Street, and there it would stay. And it gave, at extremely low cost, the church school to the Mater Della Rosa Church. And they used it in a different way. And so people that remember that building will remember it because from 1922 onwards, it was Polish, Mater Della Rosa, and they remember it as having a bowling alley, an auditorium, a school annex, which was mostly for adult education, and they also had a cafeteria. So it changed all its floors, its functions, to suit the needs of the Polish that were there, because their Mater Della Rosa school campus already had convents and schools, and they didn't need anything else. Now, we're going to talk about that move upwards and what happened to that church. And remember, you're going from a church that was very unique looking to another church that was also very unique looking, but in a very different way.
And so quickly before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, If you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you are interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214 and they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. And they are also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So getting back to our interview, the church moved to Upper Chestnut Street. What was that campus like?
All right, that took up about 3/4 of the city block that was at the southwest corner of Cabot and Chestnut. And that was wide open because there used to be an athletic park there. In 1922, they moved the school up there, and then in the years 23 and 24, they moved the rectory, the convent, and the church up to that location. And so you had a new campus going. In this one, they made a very unique look, but it was modeled after the rural Quebec province Catholic churches. Those were not as ornate and not as high as you might expect a Catholic church to be. It was lower down, but in some sense it was more ornate because the front facade was very beautiful. They were squatted to the ground, and the inside was absolutely gorgeous. And this Perpetual Help Church #2 was that way. It's absolutely gorgeous in the front, and inside was probably the most gorgeous church in the history of Holyoke. It was so gorgeous that people loved to go there. It was probably the most popular Catholic church in Holyoke for a long, long time. Now, the school also moved up there, and so there must have been a wholesale movement of families from the Pulaski Park area, and it was. That movement was going on since about 1910, and that's because the Polish were coming in to that district. The French Canadians were getting better or money in the mills, and they moved upwards. And they also created a neighborhood, and so this neighborhood around the library is just as much French Canadian as it is Irish. A lot of the buildings on High Street were run by French Canadians. They were getting wealthier and wealthier along the way, just like the Irish were.
Now, why is that campus gone?
Okay. The biggest fire in the history of Holyoke ever happened in 1998. I think it was August 27th or 28th. And a fire was set by two young boys on a back church of an apartment that was at one of the corners of the Perpetual campus. It got onto that porch. The building was not being used. It was vacated. No one spotted it because it was on a back porch. It got bigger and bigger, and it was right behind the steeple of the Perpetual Help Church. For that reason, it caught into the steeple, and the steeple started burning. And once that happened, they finally spotted it, but it was too late. And this was by floor space the biggest fire in the history of Holyoke, which is saying a lot because this community has suffered a lot of fires. It had to get many, many firemen into the city that day. They finally put it out, and what an ugly sight. It went from a very beautiful church into a hideous look. And it also burned the rectory, the school, and the convent. It burned the two empty tenement houses along the corners. And they couldn't do anything. The boys were too young. One of the boys was mentally retarded, and they couldn't do anything to the boys' punishment. And so it was a very sad day in the history of Holyoke.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. And again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214 @yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming